Welcome to today's webinar, Cook with Curtis Stone. I'm your host, Janet Barker Evans. We are so excited to have Chef Curtis Stone with us today. We're going to hear some of his recipes and ideas for cooking meals we'll love. Before we begin, though, let's go over how you can interact with us during our time together. If you look in the lower right hand of your screen, you'll notice a small icon that looks like a little speech bubble. That's our chat function. You can click that icon to bring up the chat window and add a comment or response for our moderators. To ask Chef Curtis a question, you're going to want to scroll down below the main view to the section that's labeled questions. Type your question in the bar that says what's on your mind, and then click the orange button to the right labeled Ask Question. You can ask your questions at any time, and we're going to get to as many of them as we can. Now, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, it's even easier. Simply pop any questions or issues into the comment box, and our moderator will see them. After the webinar today, you will all get a follow-up email with all the recipes that Chef Stone shares today, as well as a recording of this webinar so you can refer to it later or share it with your friends and family. Okay, let's jump in and meet the chef. Chef Curtis Stone is a Los Angeles-based Michelin-starred chef, restaurateur, author, and culinary entrepreneur. Curtis grew up and started his culinary career at the Savoy Hotel's five-star restaurant in his hometown of Melbourne, Australia at the age of 18. In 2014, he opened his first solo restaurant in Beverly Hills, Maud, which found immediate success. Maud received a Michelin star in 2019 and has retained their standing. His second restaurant, opened with his brother Luke, called Gwen Butcher Shop and Restaurant in Hollywood, California, received its own Michelin star last year in 2022. Outside his restaurants, Curtis has been featured on television programs such as Take Home Chef on TLC, Top Chef Masters on Bravo, and Top Chef Junior on the NBC Top Chef franchise, as well as on MasterChef Australia and many other TV appearances. He is also a New York Times bestselling author of 6 cookbooks, including his most recent, Good Food, Good Life. Welcome, Chef.
Whoa, Janet, what an introduction. Nice to see you. How are you?
Great. How are you doing today?
So good, thank you.
Well, we're so excited to have you here. And I know we asked you for some recipe ideas that are not only delicious, but they're easy to prepare for just 1 or 2 people, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of people in our audience may be adjusting to some lifestyle changes. Maybe they're empty nesters or recent retirees, or they've downsized to a smaller space with a smaller kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, these transitions can leave us a little lost or uninspired when it comes to cooking.
For sure, for sure.
So when you're at home and you don't feel like cooking, do you have like a go-to quick meal for your family?
Well, I think that's got to be the key. First of all, it's got to taste wonderful. That's the absolute prerequisite. But it's also got to be really quick and simple to do, because yes, there are occasions when you're cooking for a big group, or you're cooking for your extended family. But for the most part, we do cook for 1 or 2 people. You know, that's what we do more often than not. So I think we've got to create recipes that are quick, easy, nutritious, but of course end up in something really delicious. So I've always got a couple of go-tos, and the first one is an omelette. I love it because you can have it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's very quick and simple to have, and it's such a variable item too. You can serve it so many different ways. But the one I wanted to show you today is with smoked salmon and a beet relish. You could also call it a slaw. It's a very simple thing to make. I don't want that word relish to trip anyone up and think, oh, I don't even know what that is, because it's very, very easy.
That's great. So we're going to field questions. So you guys, again, feel free to drop a question anytime in that bar that says what's on your mind. We're going to get to those in a few minutes. But right now, we have a demonstration, Chef, that you recorded for us of how to make that perfect omelet. So let's take a look at that.
Let's get cooking. One of my favorite things for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or even a snack is an omelette. The best part is so easy to make, but the technique is absolutely everything. So first thing you want to do, preheat a pan. I've turned mine onto a 6, so a moderate heat.
preheat it for a few minutes, okay? The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to crack some eggs. This is a very exciting part of making an omelette. All right, so I've got my eggs in there. I've got about 1/4 cup of milk. I add that in to my eggs, and then of course I season with a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. Just like that. Again, salt and pepper, totally up to you as to how much you use. I go through, I crack those yolks with a whisk, and I just give that a light whisk, just like this. Now you might see some recipes for a scrambled egg incorporating more cream, and that gives it a really light texture. But for an omelette, it's pretty much just a straight egg mix. Just that little bit of milk will help thin it out ever so slightly. And you just stir like so. Now this of course is enough for multiple omelettes, and I'm just going to make you the one. And before I even go ahead and start cooking my eggs, because we've been preheating that pan now for a few minutes, so that's pretty much ready to go. Make sure you crack all of those yolks. That'll really enrich the mix. The next thing that I'm going to do is make a beet relish. So in Australia we call this beetroot. Of course, in the States, we call it just a straight beet. I am going to do this. I'm going to use a glove because a beet will stain your fingers. And you might not care, but I'm going to cook some more dishes. And I don't want you to think that I've got dirty hands. So this is what you do. Stick on one of those gloves. I'm just using a box grater. I find the coarse of the graters. And you just go straight on through, the coarsest, I should say. Just like this. And you're just going to grate that beet. Now you can eat beet raw, of course you can cook it. You can cook it lots of ways. You can roast it, you can steam it, you can boil it. Really, really versatile vegetable. And all I'm doing here is I'm grating it raw because we're going to use it kind of like you would a slaw, right? Same way you'd kind of make a slaw with cabbage. We go ahead, grate the whole thing down. Okay. And then give that a little tap, and see now I'm not worried about getting that red on my fingers because I've got my glove on. Move that to one side. Then I can get rid of the glove. And then you take that bowl again and you take that beautiful grated beet, throw it into your bowl, just like that. And then you can add some different flavors. So I've got a couple of different herbs. I've got some chives and I've got some dill. So we add those beautiful greens in. Tiny bit of sugar. And some balsamic vinegar. That's interchangeable. You can put any kind of vinegar that you like the flavour of. Of course, the balsamic has a little bit of sweetness. A little bit of olive oil. Then we season that up with some salt and pepper. Again, up to you how much you want to put. And then you just give that a light mix. And that acid from the vinegar and the rich fattiness from the oil are going to create that perfect sort of sweet and sour balance. And you can either put this inside your omelette or you can serve it on the side. The choice is yours. I think I'm going to do it on the side. But that looks absolutely beautiful. And it's a nice crunchy little sort of garnish because of course an omelette is quite rich, right? It's made with eggs. And we're going to add some cheese to it as well. So it's very rich and buttery and delicious. So that bright acidic earthiness of the of the beets works really, really well. Okay, so one little knob of butter. We're putting it in here for the flavour. Of course, we're also adding it to make sure nothing sticks. I'm cooking in a beautiful non-stick piece of cookware. I'm not sure what you're going to be cooking in, but this works so, so beautifully. And also, of course, is going to add delicious flavour. Okay, so we take some of those egg yolks, some of those eggs, I should say, and we pour them. You're looking for about 1/3 of that quantity, so about that much. Now, here's the secret. You can see it start to bubble away immediately, right? So what you want to do, because we preheated the pan, is just disturb the bottom. Just use a spatula and just push it around just like that, making sure that absolutely nothing is sticking. And you'll soon see the temperature of the eggs, of course they're cold, are going to chill our pan, and we've got that beautiful light, fluffy kind of egg mixture in the center. So you push that around, And you do this until it looks like you're going to run out of egg, all right? And it's going to get stuck. That point is where you sort of shake it all out, and then you're going to have to, at some point, say, all right, that's as far as I'm going to take it. Leave it like that. You can add a little bit of smoked salmon. I just break this into pieces like so. Just like that. I've got a little bit of that goat's cheese. It's a really beautiful soft goat's cheese. So I just break it into little pieces and drop it in. Like so. Tastes good. A little bit of that cheddar. And then some more of those fresh herbs. I throw some chive and some more dill. All on the inside, leaving the outside of the omelette perfectly smooth and without any colour. Then what you do is you lift up your pan. You kind of push the egg down like that, and then you just start this very slow, gentle roll all the way to the bottom of your pan. And once you get it down to the bottom like that, you stop. And then, of course, take your plate. You can pick your pan up and just let it fall ever so softly out, just like that. Now, if there's any of these little pieces on the outside, you can remove them. You can always shape your omelette however you like, but that's looking pretty perfect to me. And then, of course, we take that beautiful relish that we made earlier, that beautiful beet relish. I'm gonna place a little spoon of it right at the back of our omelette, just like that. So if you want to get even fancier, here's what you do. Get yourself a knife, and you can just slide that knife straight down the center of the omelette, and then give people a little peekaboo at what's inside. So you get to see the salmon, the goat's cheese. You can kind of just open it up ever so slightly like that. If you wanted to, you could even add more of that beet relish right to the center. So it's right in the omelette. Finish it off with a few extra chives, a little bit more dill. Now, the only thing left to decide, is this breakfast? Is it lunch? Is it dinner? Is it a midnight snack? It's totally up to you, but it is that easy to make. You want to drizzle just a tiny bit of olive oil around the outside of the plate, you may, but I tell you what, that is a beautiful meal no matter what time of day it is.
That looks so delicious and so easy to make. I love the little peekaboo windows you can see what's inside.
I said, you can tell I have young kids come. I have a little peekaboo. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old at home, and they're always in the kitchen with me, which is lots of fun.
Which is great. You're probably teaching them to cook.
Of course, of course.
That's great. So we have some questions already coming in.
Right.
The first one's from Patricia. She wanted to know how many eggs you were using.
Oh, look, the standard is kind of 3 eggs per omelette. So, that's normally what you would make. But, of course, it's totally up to you. So if you're going to do a couple, then I sort of mix the 6 eggs in one, and then I pour half into the pan the first time. Or you can make a larger omelette in a bigger pan, and then you can cut it in half and share it, if you were cooking for 2 people. But, yeah, the rule of thumb is about 3 eggs per portion.
Got it. And Linda wants to know if the beet was raw and not pre-cooked.
It was raw. So that's why it's so good for you, because anything, of course, raw has a much bigger nutritional content than something's cooked. And the beet is raw, but it does soften from the acidity of the vinegar. You kind of cure in it, if you will. So that vinegar and the oil, of course, will marinate. But it does have a little crunch. It doesn't mean you can't cook the beets first. Of course you can. You can use even tinned beets would still be really nice, or you could steam them or boil them, and then you just go ahead and grate them the same way. They'll be a little softer when you grate them, but that's absolutely fine.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, there was a question about using canned beets. Is there anything other than beet, Wynette wants to know, that you could use?
Well, here's the great thing. There's everything but beet. The truth is you're only limited by the ingredients that you can access. So carrot would work really nicely. A slaw would do the same kind of job. So you could use a cabbage, both a red cabbage or a Napa cabbage, or just a regular or green cabbage would be fine. A little side salad would also work really nicely with the omelettes. If you feel like being a little indulgent, you could throw some French fries into the air fryer too, because omelettes and French fries work really nicely as well. So the truth is, you're only limited by whatever ingredients you can get your hands on, and there's so many things you could use, a mixture of things as well. I do relishes out of celery root. That's a really nice ingredient, but most root vegetables would work really nicely.
So Cheryl wants to, she likes the pan. She wants to know what brand of pan that is you have there.
Oh, thanks for asking. That's actually my brand. I developed that line of non-stick cookware about 10 years ago now, and it's called Durapan or Curtis Stone, and you can find it at the Home Shopping Network. So you can go to hsn.com and you can have it delivered right to your door.
Wow, that's great. Didn't even know.
They're really good pans. We use a lot of technology in that non-stick cooking, and there's no PFOA, so it's a safe pan to use, because of course there's sort of, the old school non-stick pans probably aren't the ones you want to be cooking in anymore. So but anyway, you can go and check that out if you like.
So you have a fan in the chat. Laurel is saying the pan is your line. You're on HSN tonight at 12 a.m. Eastern time, showing all your products. So putting a plug for everyone. We're going to go watch you tonight. Check out your pans. Thanks, Laurel. That's great. Angela wants to know, of anything in the world, what's your very, very favorite dish to make?
Oh, goodness. I love cooking. You know what? I think cooking is such a personal thing. And when you cook for someone that you really love and care about, then of course you want to make them happy. So when I cook for my wife, she's my favorite. Well, my kids as well. We're all in it together. She loves fresh pasta. And, there's nothing like homemade pasta. So I'll often make homemade pasta for her. And then the sauce should be really quite simple, because I kind of feel like the hero is the pasta. I have a beautiful vegetable garden, so I wander out there and see what's growing, maybe some zucchini flowers, and I'll do it in a light tomato sauce or something like that. If I'm just cooking for myself, my favorite thing in the world is crab. I absolutely love the sweetness you get with crab. A little different than the home, although the pasta and the crab could work quite nicely together.
So can we talk a little bit about cooking utensils? I mean, we just talked about your pans, but you've got the salt and pepper grinder and all that. Do you have certain, like, your favorite cooking utensils that you always turn to?
Look, I do. And I think over many years of being in kitchens, especially when I did that show, Take Home Chef, I was always in other people's kitchens, and I was constantly thinking about products that would make your life a little bit easier. And that's where my line came from. And we have hundreds of items in that line. So I'm a real product nerd. I absolutely love it. And some products that I make myself. And then, of course, there's others that I don't produce, like a microplane grater. It's one of my favorite things in the world. It's got those beautiful little sort of fine plate. You just run that orange or lemon, whatever it is that you want to grate over. Even Parmesan cheese is really nicely grated on a microplane. So that's really good. I think cooking, again, it's such a big topic, right? Outside, if I'm going to grill, I love to grill over charcoal. But yeah, there's so many fun things that you can get these days for the kitchen.
So Della wants to know more about the beet salad recipe and where she might be able to get the full recipe for that. And I think we're going to share that with you, Della, when you get an email of this broadcast. But do you want to talk again, maybe, Chef, about the ingredients in that beet salad recipe?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, the truth is, when you throw those veggies onto the grater, you could also use one of those julienne cutters or a mandolin or a julienne peeler some people might have. That would work as well. But beets, carrots, you don't want anything too starchy. So a potato or a parsnip you probably don't want to eat raw, but pretty much anything else that has a little sweetness to it, like the beets and the carrots. And then any sort of leafy vegetables, you can just slice. You can put them on a grater if you want, but the truth is you can just slice them up. Cabbage, Swiss chard. You could put zucchini into a relish for sure. You can grate that as well, because when you put the vinegar and the oil in, you kind of cure it, so it softens it a little, and it'll give it more of a cooked texture than a raw texture. Now, I can hear my mum saying in my ear, well, I don't want to eat the raw vegetables, and that's okay too, because you can steam all of this stuff ahead of time and you can still grate it, or you can grate it and then give it a quick saute or a quick steam. So you'll still keep a little texture, but you can cook it down too. So everyone's different. You don't have to serve it all raw, but it is a great way to do it. And then, of course, just like in a coleslaw, you know, you're really using raw cabbage in that, and then you're mixing it through with a little vinegar, which again will soften it. And of course, in a coleslaw, we normally put mayonnaise, but any kind of raw vegetable preparation like that works really nicely.
Anne wants to know if she can use that pan that you used, if that works in the oven.
It sure does. Yep, we put stainless steel handles on all of our pans so they can all go into the oven, and you can take them up to 450 degrees. So, yep, the good pans should always have stainless steel handles.
That's great. Okay, you rolled the omelet onto the plate in like a really cool way. You did the peekaboo window. Are there any other presentation tips? You know, they say you eat first with your eyes, right? Do you have any other presentation tips for us on how we can make things look beautiful when we plate our food?
Look, I think that's a really good question because we do eat with our eyes first, you know, and I think I've lived long enough to watch food transform. You know, I started cooking when I was 18 and I'm 47 now. So over the decades of cooking, we plate things really differently depending on which generation we're in. And nowadays there's all these swooshes on plates and powders dusted over them. And that's sort of a more modern way to plate. Of course, when I first started, the protein was always in the front of the plate and the veg was sort of around it, fanned around it. And again, it's a little personal. You know, I have one son who doesn't want any of his food touching each other. He wants to eat things separately. And my other guy, he's just like, you go for it, Dad, you know. So I always like to sort of put a bed of whatever it is that I'm serving, whether it's spinach or mashed potatoes or whatever, right in the center of the plate. And then I sort of dress the protein, if you're serving protein, over those initial vegetables. It might be a spoon of ratatouille or succotash or something like that that goes in the middle of the plate, protein on top, and then I drizzle my sauce around. But the truth is, if you experiment with it, you'll find your own style, and they all don't have to win prizes. That's what I say. When I'm in the restaurant, it's a bit of a different attitude, but when I'm at home, you can be rustic and you can just. I think food looks its most beautiful when it's in its natural state.
Yeah. Okay, Jason has a question. Jason is a sous chef for Brookdale, and Jason is asking, how well would the beet salad hold for meal service? He thinks that a lot of residents of Brookdale would really enjoy it as a side, like during lunch or dinner.
Great idea. You know what? That relish, you can actually make days in advance. And in fact, it'll get just a little softer because that acidity from the vinegar will work. By the way, if you don't have vinegar in the cupboard, you can use lemon juice or lime juice. It'll give you the same kind of result. So yeah, it's really good a couple of days in the fridge. So for a dinner service, it would hold really, really nicely. And, you know, maybe the one thing that I would say is if you're going to add some fresh herbs like some chives or some parsley or something like that, I would just do that at the last minute. I wouldn't do that and stick it in the fridge for a couple of days because that might wilt or discolor ever so slightly. So yeah, maybe just throw the garnish in right at the end.
Got it. Make it in advance, throw the garnish on. That's good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned pasta a couple of minutes ago.
Oh, yes.
And I know the other dish that you're going to demonstrate for us is a pasta Primavera. What makes pasta a go-to dish for you?
Oh, look, I think it's one of those dishes that it's an absolute crowd pleaser, first of all. It has a beautiful texture that everybody loves. But I really think that the amazing thing about pasta is just how versatile it is. You know, I've been lucky enough to travel all over Italy, and wherever you go, the shape of the pasta, because, you know, when you stop and think, why are there so many different shapes of pasta? Well, the shapes have been designed to hold particular sauces. So if you're serving the pasta with a meat sauce, you might want it to cling onto that sauce or have little pockets built into the sauce, so the meat into the pasta, so the meat sauce can actually sit in. If you're serving it with a creamy sauce, you want something that's not going to hold as much of the sauce because the sauce is a lot richer. And then a lighter tomato sauce, you might want it to hold on to. So they all do have like little specific designs and certain sauces that go with them. But the one big takeaway with that is no matter what part of Italy you're in, there are different vegetables grown in all of these different regions. There are different attitudes towards the robustness of the food. And the great thing about pasta is it is so versatile. Seafood, meat, vegetables, they can all make up the sauces. And that's what I love. Look, I'm talking like it. The more I talk about pasta,
use your hands.
Italian with my hands. Because I think that the dishes can be really wonderful. And this veggie pasta dish, it's all about spring vegetables, summer vegetables in a Primavera. It's very, very easy to make, but it's got a bit of a pesto appearance, but and even the flavor is a little like pesto, but so much easier to make. You're gonna really like this one.
And Primavera means spring, right? So it's
Yeah.
like fresh vegetables. Well, why don't we take a look at the demo video now of the pasta Primavera you prepared for us?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so for me, pasta is one of the easiest things that you can do when throwing a quick dinner together. And the truth is, I'm going to throw a bunch of delicious fresh veggies into this pasta. So the nutrition is off the charts. It's great for you. It tastes delicious, and it's very, very easy to make. So to do the sauce, it's called spaghetti Primavera, right? Now the sauce is made with leeks, a little garlic, and spinach. So very, very simple and easy. We're going to blanch all of those things and then stick it into the blender. And then we have other veggies. We've got some asparagus and some snap peas. That's going to go into the pasta. Of course, we have the spaghetti right here. Now, of course, you can make your own fresh pasta if you like, or you can do what I'm doing. I've got the boxed. This is a thick spaghetti, and it cooks in about 12 to 15 minutes, so a wonderful option. Shall we start? It's really, really simple. I've got a pot of boiling water right here. I'm going to stick my lid over there. This is a little collapsible colander, if you're wondering what that is. So I'll show that to you in just a moment, but it's in some water that's just at a rolling boil. So the first thing, take that clove of garlic, drop it on in. This is just some finely sliced leeks. You can toss that in as well. Truly, they don't have to be so finely sliced as mine are, but I'm a chef and I just can't help myself. But the truth is they will blanch and cook for about 3 to 4 minutes, right? So even if they were cut a little thicker, would still cook beautifully. All right, let me get my lid back on there. And then once that comes up to the boil and ticks away for the next 3 or 4 minutes, you need to season it, of course. I'm going to take a little salt and go straight into my water. This is one of those salt grinders. I'm cheating. You just turn it upside down and the salt just grinds straight on out. But wherever you get your salt from, that's okay with me. But we do season the water pretty well, right? You want to make sure that you get a good amount of salinity into that water because, of course, we're not adding that salt to the dish, we're adding it to the water. So we're going to strain nearly all of it out. There'll just be a little bit of it left in the flavor of the leeks. So I'm turning mine up. I'm cooking on an induction cooktop. I've turned it up to 8.5. If you guys have gas, that's absolutely fine. Now, induction, I love it because this is me just being a little bit lazy. At the end of the cooking, you just give it a wipe down. There's none of those grates to pull off and scrub your stove. So I find it a little easier. It's great in terms of energy consumption as well. So it's quick, it's simple, and it's really precise. So don't be scared of induction. If any of you are thinking of changing over your cooktops, induction works really nicely. So we're at a little boil. You can see it's just bubbling away, and that's exactly what you want. You don't want to boil it too crazy. It's been about 3 or 4 minutes now, so that's softened those leeks perfectly. And then the next thing that we do is take the spinach. Now this is a whole container of spinach that I got from the store, and you drop it straight into the water, right? We were just having a little debate before we started because we were calling it a clamshell. That's a chefy term for what the spinach is in, but it's a whole pack, which is pretty cool because if you think about all of that nutrition and just push that down into the water. Now, that spinach will literally wilt in, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 seconds very, very quickly, right? So as soon as that starts to happen and you can see it start to soften, you can pretty much take it out of the water. If you want to give it just another minute, let it come back up to the boil, you can. You remove all of those vegetables and we're going to stick it in a food processor. This makes life so simple and easy. This is a blender. A food processor would work as well, but we're going to dump all of that in and then just emulsify it with a little bit of olive oil. Season it, of course, with salt and pepper, and you're good to go. Okie dokie. So pull up that colander. Oh, it smells good. Just like that. Shake off any of that excess water. And then you can just bring that over. Scoop all of that out. And you transfer it straight into your blender. It's a little like making a pesto. If you think about a pesto, it's just a green herb, normally basil, and then you add cheese, and you add pine nuts, and you add fresh garlic, and then you blend it. You know, that's exactly what a pesto is. So this is a bit similar. Of course, we're changing the flavour using the leek and the garlic, and the spinach. Then I can remove that little cap in the top, season it with a bit of pepper, and a little bit of salt. The quantity of salt's totally up to you. And then the extra virgin olive oil. About a tablespoon or so. That'll give it a really nice, smooth, glossy texture. Pop your cap back on, and then you can turn it up. See that moving really quick. Look at that beautiful green colour. So you'll let that turn for about 30 seconds, maybe 45. It should get beautiful and silky smooth for you. Let me grab a spoon and show it to you. If I dip in, you can see that beautiful, not only that gorgeous vibrant colour, but also that beautiful texture. So easy to make, right? Now this is the sauce for our pasta. So we've got a few other veggies. Have a little taste. Oh yeah, it's good. You can always adjust the seasoning if you want more or less. Over here we've got some beautiful asparagus. Now asparagus has two sort of areas to it. So there's this woody piece down the bottom, and then this is what we call the tip. Now the way to separate that is you just literally snap them like this, right? And then this part you're going to discard because that's that woody sort of really fibrous part. And over here is the tip. So this is the piece we're going to slice. All right, so that's the asparagus. Now, while we do our veg prep, you can grab your box of pasta, and I'm grabbing about half that box, and you drop that straight in the water like that. Now, we've already added salt to this water, so you don't need to season it again. If there are a few pieces of leeks floating around in there, great, no problem. It's only going to add to the flavour of the water that you're actually cooking in. Some people will tell you to add olive oil to the water. Don't do it. It makes a mess, and olive oil costs money. Don't waste your money. Keep it in your pocket. You don't need to add the water. Just when you put the pasta in, and as it sort of starts to become slightly softer and malleable, you can just stir it around and just continue to give it a stir every few minutes, and that'll stop it from clumping and sticking together. Okay, so that's in and blanching. We come back over here, and we can just snap our asparagus like that, getting rid of those woody stalks. See that? And then you can discard those stems. And then using these tips, I like to sort of just push them with my knife like that, and then you kind of find an area, and then you can just go on through, make sure they're nice slices, and then you can literally just kind of cut these into pieces maybe an inch and a half in length. And of course those tips are the special parts with that beautiful delicate flavour. So we'll just make sure that we preserve those gorgeous tips. Okie dokie. I've got my snap peas, I've got my asparagus, we've got our pasta cooking away. So, while we wait for the pasta to cook, you can get your saute pan, which is this guy here. Into my pan, I take a little bit of olive oil. I give that just a quick swirl around. And then we take the asparagus spears and drop them straight into that pan. Just move it around the pan like that. Now there's a variety of ways to do this, right? You could throw the asparagus and the snap peas in with the water, and then you can fish it all out with the pasta. That's another way of doing it. I kind of like to throw that into the hot pan because you're going to get just the lightest little sear on there, and that's what that olive oil is doing right now. Of course, I season in layers, so I'm going to season with a little salt and pepper. Just like that. This is one of those great things that you can really, and I'm not exaggerating, you can knock this together in 20 minutes, right? So whether you're cooking for one, whether you're cooking for a big mob, then it's still such an easy dish to do. And I just love it for those reasons, because it really is just so easy. Okay, I've got that perfect sort of crispness on my snap peas and my asparagus, so I can add my sauce. So you take that beautiful sauce that we made and pour it straight over those veggies. Just like that. And you can see we're going to get some warmth into that sauce, and it tosses and coats and covers those beautiful veggies. So move that around gently. And now we wait for that pasta to be done. Here's the fun part. Let's have one last little test. I'm pretty sure this spaghetti will now be ready. Brilliant. You can just feel it on your tooth. So that's perfect al dente. Okay, let's get it out. So we're going to lift that straight up. A little bit of that pasta water is actually good. It's going to help sort of emulsify all of this together. So a little bit of that water I like. Great. And then you can just kind of toss this together. If it's feeling a little dry, add a little more of your pasta water. Of course, you can add a little bit more olive oil as well. Give it another little toss. Okay, now is where I'm going to show off. I'm going to take a little bit of that Parmesan cheese and sprinkle it over my pasta, just like that. Don't mind me spilling it all over the stove. Happens to the best of us. Give that one more toss. Beautiful. The smell in this room is divine, and I really hope you try this, because when you do, you're going to be super happy with yourself. Now, here's the little plating up secret. I've got a roasting fork, right? This is one of those forks that you use to usually carve your roast dinner with. I just put it into my spaghetti and then I spin. I just twirl it, and you can see how it sort of grabs on to the spaghetti like that. Then what you want to do is grab yourself a spoon, stick it underneath the fork, and you can kind of spin it onto the spoon like that. You can lift it up, then transfer that over to your plate. Get your spoon out of there, and then you can kind of just remove that fork. It might topple a little, and that's okay. And then, of course, what we do last, but certainly not least, is we get lots of those beautiful vegetables and put them all the way around the plate. We season it one last time with a little bit of that fresh Parmesan. That is looking pretty good. A little bit more of that gorgeous Parmesan over the top. I've got some fresh basil. We stick a little of that over as well. The reason I leave that as a whole leaf is the second it hits that hot spaghetti, it really starts to release its fragrance straight away. And I tell you what, to be able to knock together dinner in less than 30 minutes for sure, and it look and taste like this, you are on an absolute winner. Not bad, hey?
That looks so delicious. Now everyone's hungry now.
Oh man, we should have had a snack before we started, shouldn't we?
We absolutely should have. Now I'm hungry. I have to say, I love that tip for the roasting fork to plate it. It looked so good. I never thought of that. That's another good plating idea.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of those ways to just get a little bit of height into the pasta, because you don't want it all sitting flat on the plate. But the truth is, it's going to taste the same no matter what. So whether you want to go to that extra effort of the presentation or not, that's totally up to you. But that little twirl that you get, even with your own little fork. I was sitting there one day just twirling pasta with my own fork. I thought, oh, it's so pretty the way it stands up when you do that. The great news, though, about that sauce is you can, again, if you don't like leeks or you can't get any leeks, you can change it out for so many things. You can either just omit one of those ingredients. You can throw a couple more things in if you want. Green onions work really well in that recipe as well instead of the leeks. So, there's so many great leafy greens out there. Swiss chard, we call that silver beet in Australia, by the way, Swiss chard. There's so many great, if you're down, there's a lot of people down in the south, and you can get all sorts of beautiful greens down there. Mustard greens are really good, but, just play with it. It's a really nice recipe.
Well, and before we showed the video, you talked about the shapes of pasta, which is really interesting. I never thought about it, right? I never really knew why they were shapes. And you chose spaghetti for this.
Right.
Why does this work great with spaghetti?
Because the sauce has a really nice sort of coating quality to it. So it coats the spaghetti really well. So I think when you twirl it around your fork, you get just the right amount of sauce with it. And then I leave the vegetables still a little tender, the asparagus and the snap peas. So that gives you like a little pop of texture, if you will. If you don't want to serve those veggies, you don't have to. Another way to get that little bit of crunch or pop, that texture, you can take literally just, when you get to the end of your loaf of bread and you've got those couple of crusts that no one wants to eat, you can just crumble those up, throw them into a pan with a little bit of olive oil, season it with a little salt, toss them until they're crisp, and that's a wonderful pasta topping as well. So those little breadcrumbs that have become crispy give you that little change in texture too that I really love. Yeah.
Well, that's great. The thick asparagus. So Linda's asking, and I have this question all the time, that thick asparagus that you used, is that better than thinner stalks? Linda says she can never find big, thick ones like that.
No, it's no different. Look, of course, whether it's a thin green bean or a thicker green bean, again, the bigger that vegetable will grow, the richer the taste will become, meaning less sweet. The little tiny babies usually still have lots of lovely sweetness. If you think about a pea, for instance, an English pea, if it's tiny little small pea, you can eat it straight out of the pod, and it's sweet and delicious. If it gets really big, then it sort of gets a little bit more fibrous, if you will. So, the sweet little asparagus is a really great option as well. You don't need to find the big ones.
Yeah. Rosalind wants to know if you can use walnuts in that recipe.
Oh, good idea. That's a great idea. The only thing I would say about walnuts is you might want to toast them or roast them first, because it brings out that really lovely, rich flavor. But a little bit of that, you can even crush a little of those walnuts and sprinkle it over the top. That's a really lovely idea. Yeah.
Looks like we have a lot of aspiring chefs in the audience. They've got all these good ideas.
I love it.
Elizabeth wants to know how your pasta water is not overflowing. She's like, you didn't use the wooden spoon tip. We all know the top, but it wasn't overflowing.
I always cook in a lot of water when I cook pasta, because pasta, of course, when it cooks, a lot of the starchiness comes out of the pasta. So you want it to have plenty of space to cook in. So I always cook in my biggest pot, and I don't put in too much pasta. So normally that starchiness is what kind of makes it, when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, it's getting bigger, it's going to go over the top. That's usually, and I also don't put the lid on unless you want to just put it on to get the heat back in the water. But then you can cook pasta without the lid.
There's a question, what else can you use the pasta water for?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Look, people will use that pasta water to sort of thin down a sauce. It's a little thick, although, of course, there's a little bit of that starchiness that's come out of the flour from the pasta while it cooks. So while it'll thin things down, and that's why you season the water, I've never actually thought about using the pasta water for anything other than just to sort of adjust the sauce that I'm serving the pasta with. But now you've got my wheels turning. I'm going to have a think about that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's what you can work on that. You work on ideas for that. So we have another question from Heidi. Is this sauce best eaten right away, or can it be reheated like eaten as leftovers later? Because she lives on her own, and she's like, I try to make options that are good for leftovers, and a lot of pasta sauces don't reheat well.
Right. No, good point. And I think when you've got something that's bright and vibrant as the color of our sauce in this pasta, a little bit like a pesto, you'll get a little bit of oxidization, right? If you store that sauce. That said, I've got two tricks for you. If when you put the sauce into a container, instead of covering it with cling film that goes right across the top, I always take the cling film and push it down. So the actual cling film comes into contact with the top of the sauce, right? So I push it all the way down so you've made contact with the plastic and the food. And then I wrap it a second time over the top. So then you pop it in the fridge or you put the lid on or whatever. And that will really stop, or not totally stop, but it'll cut down on that oxidization. It's a great trick for guacamole too. You know, guacamole, when you go back to it, it's turned brown on the top and you're like, you got to scoop that bit off. If you push that plastic down onto it, you'll get a little bit less oxidization, which is pretty cool. But this also lasts as long as you cool it quickly. So once you take it out of that blender, if you pour it into a container, don't put a lid on it and stick it straight in the fridge and let it cool down and then put the plastic wrap on once it's cool. Again, that'll stop it from oxidizing.
That's a great tip. That's a great tip. We have another comment. Love olive oil, but what about grapeseed oil?
Grapeseed oil is great. Grapeseed oil has a higher smoke point, so it's a really good one to cook in. Olive oil can smoke a little quicker, you know, so then you can change the flavor to be a little bitter. So grapeseed oil, I love it. I use it a lot in making vinaigrettes as well. It's a really nice neutral flavor compared with olive oil, which is a bit richer. And of course, when you talk about the flavor of olive oils, they go from nutty and sweet, acidic and citrusy. So there's a big range of flavors of olive oils. But yeah, no, I think grapeseed oil is a wonderful oil.
A question coming in from Angela, where you can get those salt and pepper grinders you had. Are those also yours?
Also mine, yep. The ones that you don't have to crank or grind. You literally just turn them upside down and it does all the work for you. Pretty cool, right? You can get them at HSN. Watch me tonight. I want it.
We're all going to be watching tonight. Thankfully, we have that tip. Angela, you and I can watch and get those tonight. Here's a great question from Ray. Do you have any ideas for using fresh sage?
Oh, good question. You know what? I have a lot of good ideas because I grow it. And it's one of those herbs that if it succeeds in your garden, it's really prolific. It grows really quickly. So, and it's a strong woody herb. So it's not one of those ones that you can just throw into anything like you can parsley, which is pretty, it brightens everything up color-wise. Sage is great. And we think of sage a lot more when we think of turkey season, right? Once we get into Thanksgiving, we think of sage in the gravy or sage stuffed in the turkey and the stuffing. I love it with roast chicken. So I'll take sage and I'll take lemon and I'll stuff my chicken with a little sage and lemon and it'll permeate through and give you a beautiful flavor. It's also, here's a little trick. Take a plate and just put a piece of cling film over that plate so it's tight, right? And then dip a sage leaf into a little bit of olive oil and sit it onto that piece of plastic. And you can do that with maybe, 10 or 15 different sage leaves. Sprinkle it with a little bit of salt and stick it in the microwave for like a minute 30. It's going to get perfectly crisp. Like you can literally bite it. It's almost like deep frying it. You'll get that same texture. But then you can use it as a garnish. And it makes the flavor of the sage a lot more mild. So you can use it on a piece of fish. You can use it with shrimp. The one thing that they do a lot in Italy, there's a dish called saltimbocca. And quite often they'll do it with a veal or a little piece of chicken. And it's sage, prosciutto, and whatever protein you choose to use. So you can put a couple of those leaves of the sage onto the chicken breast, wrap it in prosciutto, and then pan fry it and bake it in the oven. And that's a traditional dish in Italy, and that's a really lovely flavor combination as well.
Nice. Questions about your induction cooktop. You
Yes.
said you prefer working with an induction cooktop, and do you use that in your restaurant as well as at home?
I do. We have induction. In Europe, I moved to Europe when I was 22, just a young pup going over there to learn how to cook. And in Europe, induction is used commercially really extensively. Here's what I love about it. From a chef's perspective, it's really precise. If I set it to a 4, I know exactly what I'm going to get. It's very hard to set your gas to a 4, if you know what I mean. So you just have a bit more visibility and things like making an omelette. Once you get used to your induction, you'll know exactly, I need to cook this on. This works really well on a 4, or mashed potatoes works really well on a 6. If I want something to come to the boil, I put it on a 9. So I think it's really precise. The cleanup is so easy. The grill grates can be a little bit, you got to take the grates off and you got to scrub underneath. Where with induction, you just give it a quick wipe and it's done. And it also doesn't heat up your house as much as gas will. So yeah, I really like it. Don't get me wrong, I love cooking on gas too, but I think induction's pretty cool.
Here's a great question. Are there any types of oils that you should not use when you're making pasta? We mentioned grapeseed, olive oil. Are there some that you just shouldn't use?
Look, I think you use oil to either cook with, right? Or you use it to richen, or you want the flavor. So if you're gonna drizzle oil over pasta, then you're doing that for flavor. And I think when you do that, you want to use an extra virgin olive oil. Let me tell you the difference between a regular olive oil or an extra virgin oil. The extra virgin oil hasn't been heated. So the way they extract the oil from the olives is they blend them, right? And then they press it. It's called a first press. And that's all done cold. So the oil that comes out is very pure. If you were to blend that, it's called a pomace. You blend the olives into a pomace, and then you warm it up, you heat it. Of course, you extract more oil, but some of that fruity, some of that nuttiness that you get in the flavor profile of the olive oil gets lost, which is why the extra virgin oil is a lot more expensive, because you get a smaller yield. So people ask me, should I cook with extra virgin olive oil? And I said, well, not unless you want to waste some money, because what you're doing is you're turning that extra virgin olive oil, as soon as you pour it into your pan, into a regular oil. So you're degrading its price tag. But yeah, I think extra virgin olive oils are wonderful. We call them finishing oils because they're great to finish dishes with, or drizzle. You saw me drizzle a little around my omelette, and it gives you that lovely flavor.
Yeah, that's great. So, Curtis, you had one more recipe that we couldn't get to today.
Yeah.
Because of time. And we're going to...
all the great questions that we've had.
We've had so many great questions. I know. We're going to be posting that video on our site and sharing it with the attendees today. But what was it that you whipped up for dessert for us?
Well, I wanted to do a healthy dessert, because I know when we think of dessert, we quite often think of chocolate mousse and ice cream. And of course, those things are fantastic. We all love them. But got to be in moderation. You know, my mum and stepdad live in an assisted living in Australia, and you know, I'm often talking to them and the residents there about what they like and don't like, and one of the things that I hear a lot is I'm not as active as I used to be, which of course means you don't burn off as many calories. So maybe dessert's one of those places that you can you know, turn to fresh fruit, because you know, fruit has its natural sweetness and it's absolutely delicious. So I took some, and don't get me wrong, this isn't like a weight loss dessert. It's still really indulgent and fabulous, but I think you'll like it. I took some pineapple, I skewered it, and then I made a little coconut caramel and toasted some of that coconut. So it's a really, really lovely dessert. You can cook it outside on the grill. You can do it inside, of course, but I think you'll really like it.
It looks so delicious. I'm going to try it this weekend. The caramel sauce, when you're making that, I'm like, that actually looks easy. Like I can make that. That looks like something I can make.
And you can make, if you make a batch of that, you can keep it in the fridge for at least a week. So
really?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't last a week in my fridge because I've got 2 young boys, and you know, they'll even stick their fingers in there when no one's watching. So, but anyway.
Do you cook a lot of things with the boys? Like, or is this something you'd make with the boys, the pineapple?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, my little Hudson, when he first came into my life, I just opened my first restaurant, Maud. So it was perfect because he was small enough. You know, in the restaurant, we have these deep sinks. I could just pop him in the sink and he would stand up on the side of the sink and watch me as I was cooking and prepping, and we'd play music together. And we had this really fun bond when he was really young, of coming to work with me. And, you know, and he still sits up on my kitchen counters, and we make breakfast together every morning. And yeah, he really enjoys it. And Emerson's following along in his footsteps too. They both love being in the kitchen. That's
amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I have to imagine being around it. They're going to either love it or hate it.
Right, exactly.
You know, we had a question from somebody else that was interesting. Is there any food that you won't eat? Is there anything that you're like not doing it?
Goodness, I can't really think of anything. I mean, the flavor of anise, you know, like if you said, do I like licorice? My answer is no. I don't like black licorice. And that has sort of that anise flavor that is really intense. That said, fennel has a little bit of that same flavor, and I like it, but it's quite subtle. So maybe if it was too rich, anise, but I'm clutching at straws. I like most things.
I assume that you kind of have to. You have to be able to willing to do all of them. With that said, we have a question coming in from Kathleen who wants to know, what is your signature dish? Like, what is the dish that is like, that is Chef Curtis Stone's dish?
Do you know, when I first opened Maud, I had this real feeling that I didn't want to have a signature dish. I wanted to always cook something new and always be on the move and always be developing. And I didn't want to just rest on the laurels of like, well, I made that, they all loved it, so I'll just keep serving it. So I made a real point of not having one. But we did do a ravioli on that first menu at Maud. And it was made with it was made out of duck. And it had a beautiful citrus sauce with a little finger lime in it. And ever since we served that, people have asked for it. So it's resurfaced on menus time and time again. And I also cook over live fire. So at Gwen, we have a beautiful butcher shop in Hollywood, and then we cook everything over live fire. So I guess that's become a bit of my signature as well, cooking over live fires. But I just love food. I could sit here and talk about food forever because I love it all, and I like it prepared so many different.
That's great. Hey, Mark wants to know if you're working on any new cookbooks. Speaking of always wanting to do something new.
Do you know what? I've been so busy with my restaurants that I just had this conversation with someone the other day, and they said, why haven't you written a book for a minute? And I said, it's not something that I would ever just palm off to someone else and have them help with the recipes. It's a very personal thing. So writing all those recipes, testing all those dishes, it really is a labor of love, and you work at it for 9 months, a year. So I've been pushing it off because I've been so busy in restaurant land. But it's time. I would love to recast onto another book because I love books and I love sitting down and looking through them, and it is sort of a bit of a moment in time. I look back at my last couple and my kids were at different ages. I've got images of little Hudson when he was in the vegetable garden. So yeah, it's time to do another one for sure.
That's great. Well, we're going to be watching for that. We're going to be watching for that one. So, Chef, I want to thank you for joining us today and giving us such great tips and recipes, answering so many great questions. And thank you, everyone who's joined us. You had great questions today as well. We really enjoyed that. I want everyone to know that, speaking of cookbooks, by registering for this webinar, you're eligible for a chance to win Chef Curtis's latest book, Good Food, Good Life. And if you have not already done so, you can still enter your name in the registration link at www.brookdale.com/in-the-know for one of the 5 available books. Sign up now, put your registration information in, and then you can win one of those. And we're going to be emailing all of you a recording and a transcript of the webinar, plus the bonus pineapple video and copies of all these recipes so you can view it again, share it with your family and friends. And we just loved it. It was such a great time. So thank you so much. It was awesome.
Janet, it was so fun to do that with you, and I really hope you have success with your pineapple. I know you mentioned you were going to try it this weekend.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it this weekend. I'm going to do it. I'll let you know how it goes. I think it's going to go well.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. That was a real fun.
Thank you so much. And everyone, please join us on September 20th for our next webinar with best-selling author and meditation practitioner Sharon Salzberg. Sharon is going to guide us through a meditation and provide information on how meditation can benefit your health and overall lifestyle. And each of our webinars features a different subject. You can visit brookdale.com/in-the-know to discover more. And we hope we see you again soon. And until next time, we hope you stay happy, safe, and well. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Chef.
Nice to see you guys.
Thank you.